All right, hello classes. This is Mr. DeCoco, video lesson number 7. This is the 7th video lesson. We've been out of school for quite a few weeks now, and it looks like it's going to be a few weeks more. So a couple more of these coming, and hopefully we will be together in class and things will return to normal. But in this video lesson, you can see I'm filming from the garage. It's a different room, if you're wondering. I thought the lighting was better here, so I figured I'd go into the garage and change it up and see how the video comes out. Two things I want to do here. I just want to explain a little bit about the War of 1812, and then also give you a preview as to what you're going to learn about for next time, and what the lesson is going to be about that you complete between today, Tuesday, and Thursday. Okay, so the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was a war between the United States and Great Britain. We declared the war. We declared it because we were very, very angry at Great Britain. They were doing two things that were annoying many Americans. For starters, they were impressing our sailors, which means they were kidnapping American sailors off of American ships and forcing them to serve in the British Navy. Another thing we were very upset with was the fact that the British were encouraging Native Americans to attack our settlers in the West. Also, the British were trading with these natives, and they started trading them guns. So this went on for years. The frustration level was rising, and eventually there was enough support in Congress to declare war on Great Britain, which we did. First couple years of the war, we were losing badly. Or I shouldn't say first couple years. First couple of months of the war, we were losing badly. We tried to invade Canada twice and failed. Then we started winning the war. We beat Great Britain in a series of naval battles around the Great Lakes. We defeated Native Americans out west. But then we started losing again. Fresh British troops came from Europe. They launched an invasion of the United States. They burned down Washington, D.C., almost captured our president. And then shortly after, the war comes to an end. Both sides realize that they're gaining nothing from this war. So the United States and Great Britain agree on a ceasefire, and the war ends. Ironically, weeks after the war ends, the biggest battle of the war is going to be fought, the Battle of New Orleans. It's a battle where Andrew Jackson becomes a hero because he leads the United States into a lopsided victory over the British. Almost 2,000 British soldiers are killed and wounded in this battle, and only about 250 or so Americans are killed or wounded. Most of those wounded. I think only 20-something were killed. So it's a very lopsided victory that made Andrew Jackson look like a genius. And years later, he's going to use that popularity and his and what happened during this battle to run for president and become president of the United States. And he's going to be a very different president, as we're going to find out when we get to it. So, War of 1812, nothing was really lost, nothing was gained. Some people say the war was really unnecessary, and it was, no wars are, all wars are bad, but this really was a war where it seemed to have not been fought for the best of reasons. But one thing that did happen is after this war, the United States developed a lot of pride in itself and a lot of confidence in its ability as a country. And this is going to start guiding our actions after the war. Tonight, or today, or the next few days, you will be reading and answering some questions about what comes after the War of 1812. We have a time period in the United States called the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is a big change in the way people live. Revolution means change. Okay, now many times we think of war, like the American Revolution. That is a change if you think about it. That was a big change. It was a violent one, but it was a change. Revolutions don't have to be violent. They don't have to be wars. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. The Industrial Revolution in the United States was not a violent one. Nobody got hurt, really, unless you count accidents in factories. But it was a time when most Americans, many Americans, I should say, not most, but many Americans shifted from farming to manufacturing. And as time passed, more and more people left farming and went to go work in factories. And today, very few Americans farm. Most Americans don't farm. Very few do. A little scary to think that such a small number of people provide our food. But that's the way it is. Technology has changed and culture has changed, and we're able to do that today. But when did this start? This all starts in the mid 1800s, literally before the War of 1812. And the Industrial Revolution, this change is going to start taking place in New England, the New England states. The New England states include Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Maine. Did I get them all? Yes. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Maine. Those states are the states in which you start to see the first factories in the United States. You might be wondering to yourself, well, why New England? We're a big country. We had more states than those, and why not a state in the South? Why not the new states in the West? Well, the reason why the Industrial Revolution starts in New England and those states I mentioned is because those states have fast-moving streams, and those streams can provide water power to machinery. They're very close to resources. That's number two. In other words, they're close to major ports, and they're close to the coal and the iron that was coming from Pennsylvania. Number three, they had lots of available workers. Keep in mind, in New England, most people did not farm for a living. They were subsistence farmers, which meant most of the year they had a lot of time on their hands, let's put it that way. And they really didn't want to farm if they didn't have to. So you had a lot of people wanting to work in factories and available to work in factories. And you had a higher population to begin with to draw from. And then finally, the fourth reason is there was money in New England. The New England states were the richest states of the country. You had more people with money in those states who could afford to invest and pay for building factories. Again, to have a factory, first you have to build it. It takes a tremendous amount of money up front, money that most people don't have in other areas of the United States, or they wouldn't have incentive to do it. So to review those reasons once more, the reason why the Industrial Revolution starts in the New England states is because they had, one, fast-moving streams, two, they were close to resources, three, there were workers available to work in those factories, and four, there was money in the area. Again, I'm putting my fingers up to the camera here, but I want to emphasize there were four reasons why that happened. Now, once the Industrial Revolution starts, things really start to move along. A lot of new machines are invented. Machines like the spinning jenny, the water frame, the power loom. These were machines that were used in textile factories, which were factories that made clothing. All clothing was handmade before this time. For the first time in history, clothing is starting to be made in factories. It's mass-produced, and this totally changes things. Today, when you go to the store, everything's made in a factory. None of the clothes we wear today are made by hand. So new machines are being invented. New ideas are being promoted, like the factory system, which means bringing all the steps of manufacturing together into one place, a place that we would call a factory. One invention that's invented at this time, which is going to really change the course of American history, is the cotton gin. The cotton gin is something invented by Eli Whitney. It's a machine that cleans seeds out of cotton. What that means is that by having a machine take the seeds out of the cotton, now one person running a machine could do the work of 50 workers. So what happened was this put a huge demand on cotton production. Now there was an incentive to grow lots of cotton in the South, which meant make your plantation bigger, which meant get more slaves, which meant the price of slaves went up and slavery became huge in the South. So a machine that was intended to actually reduce human labor, and Eli Whitney, by the way, was a Northerner who was hoping it would help lead to the end of slavery, it actually made the situation worse. And we're going to learn more about this in future chapters. Speaking of Eli Whitney, another thing he does is he creates the concept of interchangeable parts, which means making all the parts of something alike and the same. The reason for doing that is to make sure that it's easy to repair things. Instead of throwing a whole something totally out, if it's broken, you can replace the parts of it. Now, this also led to mass production and cheaper prices. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, it's like that today. And you're right, it is like that today. But at one time, everything that we would use today would have been handmade back in like 1800. But in the year 2020, practically nothing is handmade. Anything mechanical is just a collection of parts put together. And sometimes it's worth repairing those things, sometimes it isn't. But on expensive items, like say a car, you're certainly not going to throw your car out because it doesn't start. You would change the parts that make the car start. The starter, the solenoid, the batteries, something like that. A car is too expensive to just throw out. None of us have that kind of money. So that's the advantage of interchangeable parts. It makes things easier to fix. It made things cheaper, and it led to mass production. And it encouraged more and more factories, which would encourage jobs. Okay. Now, the last thing I'll mention before I end the video, because I don't want to make this too long, is that the Industrial Revolution is going to lead to the growth of cities. Factories are located in and outside of cities. And the reason why is because most cities in the United States were located on water sources or ports. Also, cities had people who didn't farm, people who would be willing to be working in a factory. So it was really the perfect place to build a factory, which is why this just made cities get bigger. As cities had factories being built in and outside of them, more and more people then started moving to cities. And they ended up getting crowded. And this led to some problems for a few years until people were able to fix it. And the problems I'm talking about is sanitation. In other words, getting rid of all the garbage and the human waste that's being produced in these areas. And also fires. They didn't have modern day fire departments like they do today. We take that for granted. Your house starts burning, a fire truck comes and they put it out before it burns your neighborhood down. Back then, the only firefighting techniques they had were people with buckets of water and cooperation with your neighbors. And you would just hope you guys could put the fire out before it got out of control. So these were big problems in crowded areas. The risk of fires and diseases and overall dirtiness was an issue early on. But as time passed, cities got cleaner. Fire departments were created, and these things weren't as big of an issue. So that's all I want to mention about the Industrial Revolution. Last thing I'll say before I end the video is that make sure you keep checking these assignments, or checking the classroom page, I should say, for assignments. You should be doing that in all your classes. We are in a new quarter. Okay, I am going to be tracking who does the questions and who doesn't. So after you do questions, make sure that you submit them on the Google page. You do them, you get credit. You don't do them, I can't give you credit. So the questions you have for next time we meet, or next class I should say, which is Thursday, would be to complete the Chapter 10, Section 1 questions that are going to be attached on the classroom page right after this video. So you'll go on the classroom page and well, if you're watching this video, you would have accessed it already, but you'll see that there's also a link to questions. Use your textbook if need be to complete those questions. Chapter 10, Section 1. Also attaches a video on the Industrial Revolution. So it's a pretty informative video. It's good because it goes beyond the time period we're learning about. It goes really up until the early 1900s, which is a time period you'll learn about in 8th grade. And it also draws in some comparisons to the modern day. So it's a good video, and I encourage you watching it. Okay, with that said, I hope everything is going well, and stay tuned for the next lesson on Thursday. Till then, take care, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.